Yes, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's a wonderful hospitality I've received, and it's great to actually be talking about something we're doing now in New Zealand rather than something we did 25 years ago, because if you thought introducing accrual accounting and accrual budgeting was exciting, well, when you start using that information and building on it to get yourself into making advances on fiscal sustainability and service performance, that's when it really gets exciting. And so it's a real pleasure to be here to talk to you today, because what we're doing in New Zealand at the moment, we're integrating these ideas of fiscal sustainability and service performance reporting because they are related. If I go back to the slide that Ian put up, we see here, I'm going to play with this toy that I've been given. It's this one here. This is a slide about balance, about equilibrium. You can't, if you can't increase the resources you put on services without having an impact on your taxes or on your debt. And likewise, if your debt blows out, then there's implications for your tax flows and for your services. And the idea that you could perhaps that you can cut taxes without impacting your debt and your service level, well, we've got a word for that in New Zealand. It's called bollocks. These things are related, and so we really need to get ourselves into a position where we're providing good information to the decision makers, the fiscal decision makers, in order to enable them to keep this balance, to keep this equilibrium going. And that requires good numbers. That requires accountants. And I actually think it's a duty of accountants to be involved in this space, to turn up and be in this space. Because if we don't, then what happens is poor fiscal decision making. And poor fiscal decision making leads to sovereign debt crises, tax revolts, people protesting, marching in the streets, complaining about the services they expected not being delivered to them. And we don't want to get into that situation. That's a calamity to be in that situation. And so we need accountants to assist to ensure that we don't get there. How's that happening in New Zealand? Let me talk about one issue, where we were getting out of balance. And you can see this chart, which shows our proportion of working age on benefit in New Zealand, just growing. We have a social welfare net in New Zealand where we provide income support to those that can't work, can't be on a job, through unemployment benefit, invalid's benefit, sickness benefit. And we try to assist them into employment, to assist them to lead productive lives. And you can see from this that we're doing a pretty rotten job at it. In the 1970s, we had 2% of our working age population on a benefit. Go to 2010, 12% of our working age population on a benefit. That's a 500% increase. It's not sustainable. So, what do we do about it? It's a problem. It's a problem not just fiscally, it's a problem for the people as well. What we've... this way. Let's go back to thinking about what the problem actually is. People want to lead productive lives. They want to go through from being educated, working, being employed in a productive life. And so we've put into place a social welfare benefit and a social welfare system that supports people when adverse events happen to them or happen by them. So to help them back from going off the path back onto productive lives. If only life were that simple. In reality, people cycle in and off benefits. They cycle in and out of jail. They cycle in and out of healthcare. And they go between one system and the other. And when you look at this sort of health services dashboard, it becomes quite important to know how big these arrows are, what people are in each area, where the intervention that will matter the most has an effect. And there's a problem here, because if you've got a goal of getting people back to leading productive lives, whose responsibility is that? Is it the health department, or the social welfare department, or the corrections department? Well, when you look at trying to analyse this is essentially a risk analysis. It's the analysis that an insurance company does when they're writing an insurance policy. They're thinking about what are the risks, what's the drivers of the risks, what's the causes of the risks. So we put those people onto the job. The risk assessors, the risk analysts, the actuaries, and we ask them to assess for us what is the fiscal cost of the working age benefit situation. And that became the core of our investment approach to welfare. This investment approach focuses on and determines the long-term fiscal cost of the working age benefit current working age benefit population, the long-term fiscal cost of benefits. And that enables us then to target our measures to get people to being productive where it counts the most. We want to focus on investing, and that's why we use the term investment approach to welfare, in people that have the highest risk of remaining on benefit for the long term. So we have an idea of the total fiscal cost, and we're looking to reduce that cost. So transparent reporting of the cost of the long lifetime benefit is absolutely critical. And that requires the actuaries to have their views about the drivers of these problems. And it requires evidence and data and population analytics to determine what is actually causing the problems. And then we're using that information to actually make changes to the services that we offer these people. There's 4 critical success factors to this approach. The first critical success factor is having a measurable outcome. In our case, our total life cost of benefits is $78 billion. It's the actuarially calculated commitment that we have towards social welfare. To put that in perspective, that's around about 30% of GDP. It compares to our debt, which is about 25% of GDP. This is a number worth focusing on. So we have a measurable outcome that we're looking at. Second important factor is that we use the evidence, we use the data, we use the population information to inform and analyse what's making up that number. Third, we have incentives and accountability mechanisms in place to ensure we target the right population. And that's what I mean by ministers setting challenging liability performance targets. And finally, and most importantly, we provide the financial discretion and the service discretion to the people operating on the ground and with the NGOs, with the welfare service providers, with the recipients, to actually have the discretion to be empowered to direct resources to where it has the most impact. That's the theory. How's it working in practice? This, I mentioned our liability was $78 billion, and this is an actuarially calculated number. And any of you that are aware, familiar with actuarial numbers will know that you get the expected actuarial experience, and then you get the actual actuarial experience. And this actually enables us to target performance and to target performance metrics for the social welfare services. We're not going to hold social welfare staff responsible for the CPI or for the interest rates or for the performance of the economy, but we can hold them accountable for the actual impact that they're having on the service delivery they're providing to put people back into employment. Look at one of the key factors here. One of the areas that has the highest lifetime cost is sole parents. Sole parents and invalids had the highest lifetime costs. Before these reforms, was that where we were putting the effort into? It wasn't, no. We were putting the effort into the unemployed because we wanted to get the unemployment rate down. Focusing on the sole parents actually has a bigger fiscal impact to us than focusing on the unemployment, who do tend to rotate in and out of work quite a lot. So let's look at the sole parents. Before the reforms, we had this approach that was very much a one-size-fits-all approach. You get the form filled, get the eligibility criteria checked, go through the application process, give them the money, see you, ta-ta. And we're pretty efficient at doing that, but it wasn't getting people back into leading productive lives. So we're moving now into active triage, differentiated case management, work focus, particularly on part-time work, because that's what sole parents can do. 3 years ago, we had 4,300 teenage mums on benefit. At the moment, we've got 2,800. That's a 30% reduction. And what was the biggest factor in all that? Well, it was a new idea that we came from discussions with the community, that these solo mums didn't want to not be productive, but they kept on hitting obstacles, and they needed some help through those obstacles. So we've put a liaison aid for these people, and these people help them, go with them to the social welfare officers, to the job centres. They go with them to the police when the kids are acting up. They go to the principals with them, with the principals meeting, to make sure the kids turn up to school, actually get their vaccinations. Because these are the sorts of problems that they are facing, and we're just rocking them back and having them back, becoming more dependent again. It's that help over that hurdle, if you like. And so we've gone from 4,300 to 2,800 solo mums. And I've talked about that total cost, that total measurable outcome, and that is critical. But those other three things are critical too. The use of evidence, the use of analytical data. And so what we're ideally using randomised control trials. We generally try and use those, because once you've got the evidence from those, then you can put them into the actuarial models and change what the expected performance levels is. When you do the randomised internal controls, you can work out the return on investment. And that's critical, because we've got limited resources. We want to put those resources where they matter the most, and the return on investment in terms of reducing that lifetime cost is the way to go. Hence the investment approach. But to do that, of course, you need to know the cost of your services. You need to accrue accounting. We're building off the information levels that we've had previously. And of course, then you've got to be able to use that information, and that's the financial discretion, the financial, the service performance discretion, and to have good targets. I talked here about ministers setting challenging performance targets. Half our targets we find aren't challenging enough. The public service, once they're incentivised, once they're empowered, they achieve those targets more. The other half, we just can't achieve. We've got targets to get a more digitalised government. We seem to be running into problems left, right and centre on that. But our crime targets, to reduce crime by 5 years, over a 5-year period, we've hit them in 3 years. So it's a real challenge getting those targets right. But it's pretty important. What we're actually doing is bringing numbers into welfare, bringing accounting into welfare. Our next target is at-risk youth. There are 2,000 6 to 9-year-olds that have had the worst start of life in New Zealand. Those 2,000 6 to 9-year-olds are going to cost us $750 million in prison costs alone. And they're 6 to 9. We've got a responsibility to them. For God's sake, for 3/4 of them, the state is their parent. They don't have parents. It's a moral obligation. But with $750 million of prison costs over their lifetime, it's a financial obligation as well. We have to step up and start addressing those problems, using the service performance information, connecting it to that fiscal sustainability. And I think it's a duty of this profession to apply those skills in informing the service performance provision, in enabling the fiscal sustainability, and ensuring we don't get into these sovereign debt crises and tax revolts and marching in the streets. So, over to you. Thank you.
I must confess that every time I hear you speak about New Zealand, I'm always fascinated, not only because I think you're really advanced in your practice, but also in your thinking. So thank you very much for that, Ken. I think that was really impressive. Maybe I should find a way of making myself invited or something to New Zealand so that I can see on site, how you deal with the matters. And I think there are colleagues from the European Commission in the room. Maybe you could set up a trip for the EU 28 member state to come to New Zealand and, take a feel of how you handle matters over there. Now, before the room has a chance to ask questions to the three of you, I'm sure that Bob and Jan want to ask you a couple of questions, Ken, because that was really a fascinating report. So, Jan, maybe you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was really showed the power of those sorts of techniques, Ken. And I guess, you've given us some sort of specific examples there. What would you see as the challenges in terms of really kind of, using this information in practice and getting it accepted?
Well, I go back to those 4 success factors, because each of those 4 success factors is a real challenge in themselves. Getting the measurable outcome. If you think there's a shortage of accountants in government, there's a big shortage of actuaries. So just the capability in doing that alone is a real challenge. Getting the performance incentives right, the challenges right, is a real challenge. As I was saying in speech, an example we have is our corrections department. They were telling us that a tough target would be to increase or reduce recidivism by 10% with their rehabilitation programs. And privately we were hearing they thought they could do 15%, but they wanted a target of 10%. We've actually set them a challenge of 25%. And the reason we've done that is because that 15% was what corrections could do. To actually reduce recidivism, we think that you need corrections working with the post-prison services, or services. And those 2 groups together, working together, will achieve 25%. So setting those targets is really tough. The third, probably, thing is that financial flexibility and service flexibility. That's actually about saying, okay, here's your resources, and you're providing services to achieve these aims. You have flexibility to do that, and that's good use of information. But in the political scene, you've got a challenge, because politicians are in a slightly, to my mind, they're in a slightly different game. They're in a competition for power. And information for them is simply a sword and shield that they're using in that fight for power. So, you know, there's a challenge in ensuring that performance information gets used in improving performance and allowing managers and public servants some discretion within boundaries to do that. And in a sense, kind of almost keeping the politicians at the strategic level, setting those strategic objectives. And that's a challenge, getting people into that mindset, because often I think you've got politicians coming with preconceived notions about what services will work and what services won't, and they're not looking at the evidence from the randomised controlled trials, etc.
That's interesting. It seems that politicians behave more or less the same way all around the globe, huh? That's interesting. The United States of America is slightly bigger, I think, than New Zealand, right? But maybe you'd like to learn something from Ken and ask him a question, Bob?
Yes, Ken, I guess obviously you've learned a lot through, I won't say trial and error, but through going through this exercise and identifying the critical success factors. But if I were a government wanting to start off on a service performance framework, what would be the first place to go, or some of the first things you'd think about? And are there any resources that are available out there that people can go to look, other than traveling to New Zealand possibly, which was a good idea, any other places one might look to try to get more information about it?
Well, in a lot of ways, a lot of the answers are actually out in the field. We didn't have the answers necessarily in Wellington. You know, we had them in the regions, and so I'd go there. I wouldn't go to Washington possibly for the answers. I'd go to some of the regions. We have a program of police which is called Prevention First, and essentially it was trying to move resources from response to prevention, and essentially the ideas about how we could do that came from the police. They didn't come from the head office, and you know, the most important thing we did was actually gave them iPads, because with iPads they could feed information, and they could be more mobile. Didn't have to come into the station and out of the station, and that gave them 4% productivity gain, which we could put into prevention, and that reduced crime. So getting on top of that, but that wasn't an answer from any great wisdom. It was actually going to the people in the field, and then using it, giving them the respect and empowering them.
Thank you. Well, as we have a little bit of time, I think, maybe for once I'm going to abuse my position as chair, and I'd just like to have a very short comment from the three of you on integrated reporting. I think Jan mentioned his involvement in the IRC project, and personally I'm very hopeful that this may be the next step, and there's a lot to be expected from that. So before opening the floor, can I have your views, of the three of you, a very short comment on how you think the prospect look like for integrated reporting in the public sector? Maybe Jan, you want to go first?
Yes, I mean,
really
I'd sort of base my comments on some sort of exploratory work that CIPFA did, just looking at the ideas with UK stakeholders. And I would say that the initial reaction was that actually the sorts of ideas in integrated reporting actually would work better in the public sector, because the public sector is much more aware of and used to reporting on its broader activities. Yeah. So I think, you know, if you think about service performance reporting that we've talked about, it is used to thinking about particularly outputs. It's starting to think about outcomes. Those are both key ideas in terms of the business model part of integrated reporting. It's also used to looking at the broader impacts, and so we've talked about fiscal sustainability. Obviously that's, you know, there are broader impacts to look at, but then when you think about actually integrated reporting, saying analyse your impact on capitals and your impact on the broader environment, all of the ideas that we've been talking about today, I think work well with that. So although it's relatively early days for integrated reporting, I think it could fit very well with the kinds of ideas and the kinds of broader analysis that IPSASB's been developing in the two areas that we've been talking about today.
Thank you. And Bob, from an American perspective?
Well, I'll pick up on a couple of things Ian said. I agree with everything he said. That it is still in the relatively early stages, and certainly we're considering environmental issues as we go along in the federal government, and we at GAO are starting to look at integrated reporting and seeing how it might work in the U.S. for the federal government level. But it's an interesting exercise, and I think it will be important to continue to follow it and see how it develops. I also agree with Ian that we are in a different environment. We do have lots of public reporting on what we do, and so it's probably easier to get over that aspect of publicly reporting information about other types of sustainability.
I think it would be interesting, because I was watching TV this morning and saw the reactions in certain quarters in the US on Obama's pleas on climate change. So I think that would maybe bring a little bit less passion and more facts in the equation. I think that would be quite interesting. Ken, how do you see this moving forward, and especially from your perspective in New Zealand?
I do see big possibilities with integrated reporting. There's actually only one entity that I'm aware of in New Zealand that actually currently adopts integrated reporting, and it's New Zealand Post, the kind of post office. And the chief executive's kind of rationale for adopting integrated reporting was, he wanted to tell a story about the performance and the position of New Zealand Post. And if you're thinking about the investment that you have in New Zealand Post, it sure as hell ain't for profit, because they're not making a great return. They're covering their costs, but mail is going down, email's going up, or as around the world. So the story about the value add of New Zealand Post is a story about a strategy that's moving away from mail delivery and into other services. And you can tell that story. He thought you can tell that story better through integrated reporting than through any other means that he'd seen. And it's kind of interesting to me, because that's a kind of public service kind of slant on it. So yeah, I'm looking forward. I know there's a public sector integrated network being established, so I'll be looking forward to see what comes out of that. And I think everybody should take notice of that.
I mean, if I can just pick that up, I mean, I think obviously we're certainly with the network, the Pioneer Network that will launch in Washington on Monday with the International Integrated Reporting Council. We certainly want to build on that experience from New Zealand Post. And what we're doing at the moment is we've got in organisations of a number of different types in the public sector involved. So we'll look at it from the sort of international organisation perspective, for example, UN Development Programme, the national government perspective, and also the sort of local government perspective, because I think each of those will have different types of challenges. They may well boil down to being the same challenges, and really what we want to do is get them actually working and developing the reporting, like with New Zealand Post, so that you can really actually work out what the ideas are, how they apply in the public sector, and in terms of the existing framework, will there need to be some more guidance, or actually will it work straight off? So I think, we're planning to do that over a couple of years and really just get some examples out there, because I think people learn best by actually doing.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the key aspects, I think, behind integrated reporting. It's really learning by doing, and not a kind of top-down approach, which I think is extremely interesting.